Ukraine and European leaders have agreed to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire from Monday with the backing of Donald Trump. The leaders of Britain, France, Germany and Poland are in Kyiv for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and they held a joint phone call with the US President. In an announcement after the talks, they said that Russia would face new sanctions if it failed to comply with the truce. Our correspondent Stuart Smith has more from Kyiv.
It's the first time really since US President Joe Biden left office that the European and US position is aligned with Kyiv, leaving effectively just Russia to respond to this suggestion now of a ceasefire beginning on May 12th for 30 days. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking here earlier in Kyiv, said that if that isn't adhered to, if Russia doesn't agree, particularly with the unconditional part, then the United States and the UK have agreed to increase weapons supplies and other military supplies to Kyiv. Here's the French President, Emmanuel Macron, outlining the details of this agreement earlier.
There are no preconditions for the ceasefire, neither from the Ukrainians nor the Russians. It's intended to last 30 days on land, in the air and at sea, with surveillance ensured mainly by the United States of America, and to which all Europeans who are ready will contribute.
Now, Ukraine hopes that 30-day ceasefire would then pave the way for further long-term peace talks with Russia, something Moscow said it's interested in, but Kyiv is still sceptical that Russia really does want an end to this war. And also, the US Embassy here in Kyiv is warning that there is a high likelihood of significant air attacks that may occur any time over the next several days.
Stuart Smith in Kyiv. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says that any potential ceasefire would need to include a halt to US and European arms supplies to Ukraine. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova reports from Moscow.
The Kremlin is citing the dynamics on the ground, suggesting that they are in favor of the Russian armed forces and saying that any halt in the fighting would allow the Ukrainian side, which would still receive the weapons from the United States and the European Union, to have a respite, first of all, for the troops that are already fighting, and secondly, to conduct another mobilization and train other forces that would continue the fighting after those 30 days are over. That's what the Kremlin is saying, and cited as a reason for not taking this opportunity of a 30-day ceasefire. Moscow is also saying that Ukraine is trying to escape the negotiations and is not ready for the substantial talks on the Ukrainian settlement, while Moscow says the Russian side and President Vladimir Putin is doing everything possible, according to the Kremlin, to find a negotiated settlement. But having no diplomatic means at hand, Moscow says it continues its military operation by the military means. But at the same time, the hope in Moscow is that the US will try and make sure that its influence is sufficient to find the will on the Ukrainian side as well as wisdom to reach the negotiated settlement.
And Dasha, there's already a 3-day ceasefire in place. Is that holding, and what is Moscow's position on that?
Well, Moscow has said that that 3-day ceasefire that began on the 8th of May and will last till the midnight of May 10 is something that is needed to celebrate Victory Day, something that is so important for Moscow. We also hearing that there have been numerous violations. Russian Ministry of Defense suggesting that Ukraine has violated this ceasefire that Moscow proposed and says it's observing more than 9,000 times. And Moscow also says there were 4 attempts by the Ukrainian armed forces to breach the Russian border in the Kursk and Belgorod region. Meanwhile, we understand that Moscow is responding in equal manner to all of those attacks. But also keep in mind that Moscow has suggested that this ceasefire will show Ukraine's readiness for those talks to continue.